The whole pupil view is an approach to assessment that puts the pupil at the centre. This combined approach allows a truly holistic view of each pupil, looking at measurements of ability and attitudes alongside a pupil's attainment and barriers to learning. NGRT forms a crucial part of this view. Our assessments support this whole pupil view by offering you timely, rigorous ways of assessing your students in key areas, contributing to your judgment of each student. That is, when you're looking at data, it's normally to seek answers to key questions to enable you to make fully informed decisions for your classes and for your students. Here is Daisy Christodoulou exploring comparing and contrasting teacher judgment with standardised assessment data.
So I think a fascinating thing to do when you're looking at standardised test data is to compare the standardised score to the pupil's most recent teacher assessment. And typically what we find is maybe 85–90% of the time there's a really close agreement. And then what's fascinating is maybe 10% of the time there isn't. So there's a group of pupils for whom the teacher assessment is slightly different from the standard test assessment. And for some cases the teacher assessment have been more generous, in some cases less generous. So then you can just dig into that and think, why is that? And it's not about saying, well, the teacher assessment must be wrong, or the teacher assessment must be right. It's about looking at it and saying, why might that be? And you find all kinds of fascinating reasons why might that be. Some very obvious, to do with maybe pupils' attendance or something about they've been missing chunks of time in class, and that's why they didn't do well on a teacher assessment. But sometimes it sparks some new questions, and it leads to teachers following up and thinking, well, why is that? So I think in some ways the best use of the standardised tests is not to provide answers, but to generate questions. And if they generate really good questions, you can go off and investigate. That can be really powerful.
Teacher judgment is at the centre, and we'll now explore how data from GL assessment can support this. The whole pupil view poses and answers several questions for each and every student. What are their attainment levels? Are there any barriers to their learning? What is their ability? First, let's look at attainment. Our aim is to help you ensure that each student makes the best progress he or she can. You'll have many different sources of information to help build this view, such as how they work in school, their attendance, how they behave, and so on. In addition to these observations, you may also test students with your own assessments, either directly related to the work they've just completed, or perhaps at the end of a term. We see our role as working with you as an assessment partner. We support your ongoing assessments with more formal assessments that enable comparison of students to national benchmarks through the standard age score. This is very difficult to do by any other means. Our assessments provide you with consistent data, whether looking at ability, barriers to learning, or in this case attainment. Many schools use NGRT year on year, enabling them to compare and contrast student performance. Our assessments provide you with a very measured approach that can be carried out once a year so that you're looking at the same aspects of students' development each year. Through our rigorous approach to research, we work with large samples of students upon which we base our data, so we offer unparalleled statistical analysis. In this case, we're providing you with data from the new group reading test. One of the most important attainment measures is that provided by NGRT. Strong attainment in reading allows access to the whole of the rest of the curriculum. NGRT data can help guide day-to-day work with your pupils in all subjects. Using national benchmarking in reading attainment can support you in analysing groups of students that have all taken the same assessment. It helps you understand how these students compare to one another and also with other students of the same age on a national basis. This can help inform your teaching by looking at how students within a group have different profiles, require different support needs, or need further challenge. Some of the later modules cover these aspects in finer detail. Here Ryan Hibbard gives an example of how NGRT uncovered an important insight into one of their students.
Yeah, I mean, we've done the assessments this year. We have done them in the past as well, and there's been some remarkable inconsistencies really between some of the data, which I don't think we'd ever really be able to pick up without the assessment materials that we've used. There was a girl, for example, who had a reading age of 5, but yet was in middle sets, in even a middle set for English. Now, I don't believe without the assessment materials that we used that would have actually been picked up. Now she's been able to be identified for intervention, and there's a lot of intervention that's gone into that. So certainly there's a lot that's been picked up.
Our attainment tests enable annual formative or summative testing in reading. These enable you to see what students can do at a particular point in the year. Usually, this would be towards the end of the year so that you can identify any gaps in the student's learning. This can inform the next teacher in the coming year. From a formative perspective, attainment test reports also provide you with rich narrative information about individual students and groups of students that can guide your planning in a formative way. Now we come to barriers to learning. If students aren't achieving their potential, this begs the questions: why? What's stopping them? Why is there a gap between a student's attainment and their potential? Are there any barriers to learning, and if so, what are they? You'll want to know what barriers are holding students back. NGRT has a vital role to play in this respect. If a child is having difficulties reading, that barrier will cause difficulties in most other subjects as well as literacy. Where NGRT does show up reading difficulties, you may want to investigate the possibility of a special educational need such as dyslexia using Lucid COPS or Lucid LAS. Here, Teresa Cavello discusses the range of data she compiles from GL assessment to help understand her students' barriers to learning.
So on the dashboard we also have the spelling test results, the reading results and any dyscalculia or dyslexia screener. Together we can then see where progress is being made. Again, we look at spelling age and reading age, and where necessary we can make referrals to the necessary professionals, which might include an educational psychologist or other professionals that we work with in order to put support and interventions in place. So we look at we also look at the standardised score, but the reading age quite often will tell us where they need the support, and then we can put that in place in the classroom.
Another assessment that can provide real insight into barriers to learning is the PASS survey, Pupils' Attitudes to Self and School, which involves students completing an objective survey on themselves as learners. How they feel about themselves, how they feel about the place they're learning in, and how they feel about the people that they're learning with and from. PASS may uncover reasons why a student is not performing well in the classroom. In the context of ability data from CAT, together with attainment data, this may well be significant and help identify the keys to unlocking underlying potential, such as what's getting in the way of this student fulfilling their potential. There may be things happening outside of school, there may be things happening within school. Next, let's look at ability. How powerful would it be to get insight into the capabilities of a particular student? This will help validate your view as to whether you think a student is underperforming, performing as expected, or indeed, are they performing above expectation? Ability is not an easy area in which to gain objective insights. Our cognitive abilities tests, CAT, can help you gain these insights. CAT analyses 4 aspects of ability and produces a clear profile of each. Now let's look at the insight that can be gained by comparing ability with attainment. Looking at ability and attainment separately helps to support and guide teaching and learning. However, even greater insight can be derived by comparing a student's ability with attainment results to see if a student is achieving their potential in a curriculum subject. Sometimes these students are hard to spot and go under the radar.
If you look at the research on this, then there's lots of research that shows that children often from low-income backgrounds, children from ethnic minority backgrounds, children with SEN, that often they can be, sometimes the teacher assessment can be biased against them, and tests can help. Actually, you know, it seems unlikely, but tests can actually show those people's sort of true ability and what they really can do, and the test actually can be less biased than the teacher assessment. Of course, those kind of tests, they're not a replacement for teacher assessment. I think the way I've sort of used them is to use them in conjunction with teacher assessment, and as I say, to just give you an extra bit of information and to help flag up, as I say, any issues you might have missed.
For many students, the CAT results come back and look sensible. That is, what you might have expected based upon their attainment. Just as often, there'll be a minority within the group that suddenly appear to have a profile that shows they are more capable than the teacher first thought. CAT4 can help quantify those abilities that underpin academic success and potential. Without a measure of ability and potential, information about attainment would be missing valuable context. So far, we've seen that our whole pupil view promotes ability and attainment assessment to enable current achievement to be contextualised against potential. Here's Carol Holmes explaining how the concept of the whole pupil view is helping within Westhoughton High School.
The whole pupil view is one of the reasons that we're particularly fond of this package of assessments. You see, we don't see assessments as an end in themselves. Assessments provide a set of data that we can use as teachers and we can use as school leaders, but they tell a story. And the more information you have about our children, the better the story will be. So we're able then to put together the different elements of what a child is. So we can see what their attainment is. We can identify barriers to learning. So for example, dyslexia, dyscalculia, we can identify reading as a barrier. And we can also look very importantly at a child's attitude to school and how well they view education and how much they value it. And we think that's going to give us the chance to intervene early before attitudes set in. So this package gives us the whole picture of a child sitting alongside our own judgment and sitting alongside what we know about our children, and that's important too.
So to summarise, our whole pupil view philosophy has interrelated elements, but the most important point is that it puts the student at the centre. Central to this is everything you already know about your students informing your judgment. This can be supported by the interrelation of ability, attainment and barriers to learning data, what their potential might be, and what barriers to learning are preventing this student reaching their potential. The power of this model is in combining all of these to provide a well-informed whole pupil view. The better the student is understood, the better placed you are to provide the most appropriate teaching and learning and help them maximise their potential. Let's leave the final word to Kelvin Hornsby.
GL is an absolutely wonderful tool in terms of an assessment provider. Certainly in one of the MATs that I worked for, it provided a complete suite in terms of assessment, we could call mechanisms, from progress tests to baselining, transition tests, looking at removing barriers to learning, identifying them, helping teachers really get to know the whole child. When you know the whole child and where your start point is and where the gaps are, that's when you can really develop that effective relationship between teaching and learning.